All right, I am here with Brother Adisa Akinyele, and he is um, an Ifa high priest. And I'm excited to talk with him today because we are going to be talking about spirituality and what that looks like now and more importantly in the future. Brother Adisa Akinyele, welcome. I'm excited to have you here, and I'm just thrilled to have this conversation with you.
Aboru Aboye Aboshishe. Um, my name is Adisa Ajani Akinyele. My birth name is Anthony Greenwich. I was born here in the United States, in New York, and my family moved out to Washington State. Um, and I ended up moving down south after I became an adult. And so, if you hear a little Southern drawl or twang, sometimes you pick up things and you don't realize it. But I'm happy to be here. I also want to just make a side note. I'm not a high priest.
Okay.
I've been initiated to Ifa. It takes about 10 or more years to become a high priest. And the reason I say that is because you have to master certain aspects of the culture before you can assume that title.
Okay.
Um, and so, you have to be a master of herbs. You have to be a master of Odu, which are the holy text or the sacred text of Arimila and um, Olodumare. And so those take years of study to master. And then you also have to be well equipped to divine and do. You often have to do what we call ebo or sacrifice,
Mm.
and direct other people in what those sacrifices that they need to make. So, I'm studying. I've passed one phase of it, and that is I've been through the initiation. And so, hopefully, as I get older and learn more and study more, then I can be a high priest.
Yeah. Wow. That's a huge commitment from what you're describing.
Oh yeah, I tell folks usually it's like doing a PhD.
Mm.
You know, the amount of study required, the amount of interaction with everything that goes on with it is immense. It's doable, but it's a lot. And so, you will find children in Africa and Nigeria who know more than I do because they've grown up in the culture and the tradition. I came into it, I was in my 30s and early 40s, and I progressed fairly quickly. But then you reach this plateau, and it's like, okay, now, in order for you to claim that title, you have to master some things.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back a little bit because um, I know that you have a bit of a history in terms of spirituality, and it'd be great to get a sense of what your journey was like and how you ended up where you are, initiated in the Ifa.
Okay. Well, going back, I was raised in quote unquote the black church. And I say black church because it wasn't just one specific denomination. Um, I have my people are from the islands, so you have a strong Catholic and Episcopalian background on one side, on my father's side, and then on my mother's side, a very holiness, Church of God in Christ background. And so, experiencing those have helped me at least understand what spirituality was and how it had helped us as a people when we didn't have anything else. It's like when you don't have anything else to call on, or to come to your rescue, at least you can pray and have hope that the God that you serve would would give you some relief. Um, from there, once my family moved from New York to Washington State, my mother was a minister of music, so she was in demand. People were always looking for a pianist, somebody who could direct choirs and do all that stuff. So ultimately, what that meant for me and my brothers and sisters was we were going to church with her. So she had a Wednesday night rehearsal with the elders. We were there.
Oh
Friday
yeah.
night with the young adults. We were there. Sunday nights, and she had to do a concert, or a revival. We were there. So it was eye opening. But it was still something missing. And I learned, I say right around high school, that there was more to spirituality than just going to church, singing in the choir, reading the Bible, going to Bible study. There has to be something more. And I started to look into other forms of spirituality. And the first one that came into my view was the Nation of Islam. Looking at all that they have done and all that they have done to help our community grow, and still do. I don't want to say that any of these religious or spiritual systems don't do today what they did before, but they're still doing quite a bit um, to help our communities. But again, I ran into some roadblocks. Um, it's like, okay, God gave us um, thinking brains. We don't run on an instinctual level
Hmm.
like animals. So why would He give us a thinking brain to have us just follow what the person in front of us did? Where is the accountability? When you have people who they come to church, or they come to temple or whatever, and they confess their sins, only to go back out and do the same thing over again.
Hmm.
Or you see people who, they know that eating certain types of foods is bad for them, but they do it anyway, and they take pleasure in it. And it's like, okay, so what kind of message is that sending to? I know what it sent to me, but what is it sending to the rest of the congregation? That you can do what you want to
Yeah.
as long as you come in and confess and ask for forgiveness. But where do you start to develop your character? When do you start to stop making the same mistakes over and over
Yeah.
again?
So what was the big impetus for you? So you moved from the Christian faith, you got some exposure to the Nation of Islam, and did you go to Ifa from there, or was there another stop you made along the way?
There was another stop, and then there was something. How do I put it? It was a spiritual experience that I had. So I looked at ancient Kemet, and a lot of people were saying that this is the true religion. This is how we were before slavery, and all those things. So I went and researched that. Got involved with the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. I'm still involved because there's a wealth of knowledge coming out of Kemet, and still to this day, there's a wealth of knowledge coming um, that we have to help shape how we live in kind with the earth. And but what I realized was that the culture, if you read the meta nature and you learn how to read the hieroglyphs, how do you incorporate those things into your daily walk, into your daily life? And it's not easy. Some people have done it, but it's not something that I understood or could gain a thorough understanding of and actually practice.
Hmm. So you were looking for something that was a consistent practice, a daily practice in your life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because I think, one of the things that we learn from biology is that in order to memorize something, you have to study it repeatedly. You have to do it over and over again so that it becomes second nature.
Mhm.
I didn't see the second nature in ancient Kemet.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying other people haven't, but it didn't resonate with me. And so it just so happened, and I would say this is probably around 1999, um, that I ended up being a part of a theater production called Ile Ife. And that theater production was on the Yoruba creation myth.
Wow.
Talks about Obatala coming down on a gold chain from the heavens, pouring sand um, on the earth and creating land. And then from there, starting to create human beings. Um, and that's the how the Yorubas viewed creation. Well, within that play, I got to experience all of the Orishas.
Mm.
I got to experience um, fire, water, wind, and earth. And so something changed. And I don't know if it was in the acting out of the play or just being exposed to the system,
Mhm.
but it made sense. It something clicked. Okay, so um, I began studying and purchasing books and reading and doing things like that. I hadn't really talked to anybody about getting involved in the tradition. It was more, okay, I'm going to study and gain a understanding, just like I had with Kemet, just like I had with Islam. Um, I didn't necessarily do that with Christianity because that was just there. It was something I did every week as a child growing up. Um, and so when I went, I left Seattle, moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was out doing a community function, and I ran into a Babalao, which is what a high priest is called in the Yoruba tradition. And we hit it off. We just started talking, having a conversation. He also had been a part of learning about Kemet and learning. His thing was he studied under Dr. Marilana Karinga, the brother who developed Kwanzaa.
Okay.
And so he um, he studied under him, and that was our connection because I understood about Kwanzaa and the principles and where those principles came from and so on and so forth. And so we developed a friendship, and then he asked me would I be interested in attending a study group strictly for Yorubas and or people interested in Yoruba, and I said yeah. And about a year and a half after, um, I told him I was ready to commit. What do I need to do? And the first thing he said was, we need to birth your ancestors. one of the things that is different from uh, African spirituality in the diaspora versus on the continent is our connection to our ancestry. For a lot of us, we don't know it,
Yeah.
and our parents took it for granted, so they didn't instill it in us. And oftentimes we have to really fight to get the information about our grandparents, our grandparents' grandparents, our aunts and uncles who have gone and passed on. Some of these people had magnificent lives, but because of how our socialization and psychology has been developed, we ignore it. We don't value, the sacrifices that were made for us to be standing where we are today.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's important because you're not going to get it if you go to Cuba. They're not going to tell you, uh, find out who you are first. If you go to Nigeria, they're not going to tell you, find out who your ancestors are. If you go to Brazil, because all those places know who they are, it's the African American who has been stripped of their ancestral birthright, of their knowledge of their ancestors. And I'm not saying everyone, but for the most part, because there's some people who know because their parents and their grandparents made sure that they knew. But if you have parents who, hey, it was just enough for us to put food on the table and roof over our heads, and that was the grind that they lived day in and day out. They didn't focus on any kind of cultural uplift. They wouldn't have known about that. Some of them came right out the fields into working for somebody else to make money to support their family, and that's all they know.
Yeah.
So that's why it was important for the Baba that I worked with, Baba Ifa Akinyele, um, to birth my ancestors first.
Yeah.
And birthing your ancestors um, is creating a portal for your ancestors to come and be a part of your life. Um, and once you do that, then you can begin to feel connected to something much greater than yourself, but that goes all the way back to wherever your people are from.
Wow. What you're talking about is so powerful. This is massive, and as I listen to you, I'm seeing this journey that you've taken, and it's a journey that's taken place over many years, which really kind of leads us up to this moment where we are right now. Because I know a number of people, to include myself, who started out very similar to like you described, started out in the church and explored other paths. And that's led me to a different conversation about spirituality and what that means for me. So, and I know this is happening with a number of folks from the African diaspora, for sure. I mean, and you could just go online and you could see the book offerings and the blogs and all of these things. People are looking for something exactly like you described. They're looking for something more.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so,
100%. I think one of the things we have to remember is that life is a cycle. And if you look at a cycle as a circle, we because of our situation moved away from it, but now we're coming back into it. Um, and that's the beautiful thing. The key though for a lot of folks, especially those that are online doing things, is that there's so many people out giving their opinion on what you should do,
hmm,
you know, and some of those people They mean well, but they're not looking at the total person.
Mm.
They're looking at it, oh yeah, you look like you're a child of Oshun. You need to be initiated to Oshun. Okay, now you done told somebody who barely knows who Oshun is, what the concept of Oshun is, and you're telling them they need to get initiated to Oshun. Instead of doing the internal work to find out where do those characteristics come from, you know?
Yeah.
And if you know about the Oshun characteristics, eh, beauty, they enjoy beauty. Oshun is considered a beautiful thing, a beautiful force. Also a cultural force, also a
Mm.
warrior, also, the mother of creativity, you know, and also a progenitor of life. If it had not been for Shango and Oshun consummating life, humanity wouldn't be here. So
Yeah.
learn about that before you decide, okay, I'm ready to be initiated. I got my money. You don't know anything about worshiping. You don't know what's required for your daily walk when you have an Oshun force living in your house.
Mm.
You know, um, there's certain ways that you have to carry yourself because for every good element, there's a bad element.
Mm.
And that's just the balance. That's homeostasis in a medical term, but it's balance or yin and yang. Um, if we want to use other terms, so I can tell you, or no, here's one my wife often uses. She says that you know be afraid when Oshun laughs because when she laughs, she's really upset, and she's like, the Oshun characteristic is, how dare you? Ha! How dare you? Disrespect something that I have put my hand on. And so she's laughing at you like, you fool. Now you're gonna pay.
Wow.
You know. Um, you can look at it like they always say, it's always darkest before the dawn.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Well, you entering into that dark period.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be up to you and your character that's gonna determine how you come out.
Yeah. So when you look at where Black folks are going, I mean, we've kind of made some moves in this country, some strides, some don't agree that it's a lot or enough. I mean, there's always room for growth. However, in terms of spirituality, what trends and transitions are you seeing, um, from your perspective and your position right now, um, being in the Ifa tradition? What are you seeing, and what do you think is going to continue to emerge, as as we as Black folk, kind of start to question a little bit more?
I, and this is my own personal view. Um, I believe we're going to see an increase in people accepting the fact that they are children of Africa. And then from there, they're going to want to kind of clothe themselves in something African in terms of how they think. And this can be a conscious thing or an unconscious thing. I looked at the public response when Black Panther came out. Folks who never wore African clothes, who never looked at Africa as anything positive. Matter of fact, they would say, I ain't African, I was born here. We're now saying Africa is beautiful. African clothes are beautiful. African people, African culture, you know, but they only got one view, and that was from the movie. But that's a step. And as we begin to have more and more images and imagery from Africa, there'll be more for people to accept. You know, for a long time, they used to say, well, you know, the only people who are African are dark skinned people. But you find you go to Africa and there's even within the the village or the town, you could have two dark skinned parents and have a light skinned child. So you begin to see the diversity that exists amongst us as a people, where everybody has a chance to fit. Everybody can find someone like them on the mother continent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas
How?
for a long time we were in the dark and we didn't know what the mother continent looked like.
Yeah. You know, you're bringing up some really, really good points, and I know for certain. I think we talked about this offline about um, how so much of the social unrest and different social justice movements has been one of the things that has driven people, specifically Black folks, to really uh, question what they've been taught from a religious and spiritual perspective, and so we see that happening now. However, as we go forward into the future, and as I look into the future, as I'm doing this research, what I'm seeing is some big trends, specifically around, this choice between nature and transhumanism, and this move to take people to other planets and so forth. What do you what role do you see um, African spiritual systems play in the future as we address those kinds of realities?
Well, I see African spiritual systems and African culture as playing a vital role in it. If we look at, and now I'm going to say this and then I'm going to make a jump. If we look at Ifa and how we divine Odu, it's a binary system. Without the binary system, you wouldn't have digital.
Mm.
Everything would still be analog. It was a binary system that a scientist replicated to create digital, to make things electronic.
So what you're saying is this is
We're
powerful.
already the future.
This is so powerful because a lot of people don't know this. This is hidden knowledge right here that you're bringing to the surface. So what you're saying is through you talked about divining. Help me understand that. What does that mean exactly? That's introduced this whole digital experience.
Okay, there's in the process of divining, whether you use whatever you can use Opwele, you can use Marie de Lagoon. Opwele is a chain with four shells or four pieces um, of a nut. One piece is hollow, the other piece has something in it which makes it not hollow. And so when you throw that down, you can read the four as one that's not hollow is two, and one that is hollow is one. And so then you line them up as they fell. And then that um, equates to an Odu. So you might have one, one, two, one on one side, and then on the other side, you might have one, two, one, two. Well, that signature has a corresponding Odu. That when you read that Odu, it gives you a lesson. It gives you insight. It gives you wisdom. And I'm talking old wisdom. And so that old wisdom has to be brought. into modern day. That's where the value of a high priest comes in, because they've been taught the traditions of the context. They've learned the context of the initial Odu, and then because of who they are, they bring it into the future, or they bring it into the present.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So utilizing that thread um, was something that allowed scientists to say, the binary code is a powerful tool or mechanism that can be used, because within that binary code, it's almost like there's an infinite number of combinations.
Wow. So what you're saying, and which is so powerful, is that this technology that's been created started way, way back when. So in a way, it's almost like uh, this technology that we think that we're moving towards in the future was existing in the past. So we're it's just,
Exactly. Now, let's talk about an issue that exists within the African American community, and that is we have a high rate of divorce, marital discord. If you have a couple who have um, their ancestors birthed, each one can go to their ancestors to solve problems. That's where I see the future moving. So your wife has her ancestors birth, you have your ancestors birth, and you all go to separate sides of the house and ask your separate ancestors the same question. Do you get the same answer? If you do, you have an affirmative response that you can then act on, that you're not alone with. What's that do? It alleviates you from feeling like this 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 question that I have is so profound and so big that I'm afraid to make a decision. You start to make decisions not based on your own understanding, but based on the understanding of your ancestors and their interaction with you.
yeah. So what you're bringing up here is on one hand we're talking about the digital technology, but what you're talking about for the future is really this higher understanding of the spiritual technology as more of us move into this phase of questioning and initiation into more of African systems, African spiritual systems and cultures and so forth.
Yes, yes. That
Wow.
would be the benefit of more and more people embracing African spirituality. And a part of African spirituality is culture. So you begin to you look at what about the culture is affirming, because that's what culture does. It affirms your view. And so if you're African and you're part of a culture that has reverence for elders, you're going to make sure that you take care of your elders. You're going to make sure that they have everything that they need, because you understand that you stand on their shoulders. They stand on the shoulders of those that came before them.
Yeah.
And that's your first I guess pillar or foundational square, you know, is respect and reverence for those that came before you. Because if they hadn't done what they did, you can't do what you're thinking about doing.
Hmm. Yes, what you're talking about really hits on a big issue as we move into the future. This issue of community and the importance of community, and really, and how that's going to help us navigate all of the changes that are going to come. One of the big trends that I've been able to identify is, and I'm sure you're seeing it. It's been going on for some time. Is the mixing of races, and so according to the research, by 2030, Arizona is going to be predominantly, mixed race. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things that we're seeing, I mean, I'm in a mixed race marriage, for example. So as we have situations like that, what advice or direction, might you see is going to be important for us to explore and to take as we start to kind of move to these more African spiritual perspectives? Because I've got a good relationship. I don't see myself getting rid of my wife, right? But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
these types of spirit the spiritual system is interesting, and I won't say just interesting. It's connecting with me, and I'm sure that's going to be the case with a lot of others who are in these types of situations.
Yeah, and this is like you said, it's an increasing um, aspect of our lives now. Um, when you look at what your ancestors, and this is again part of that philosophy coming out of Africa. What do your ancestors want for you? They
Mm,
want you to be happy. They want you to have a loving relationship. They want to have an opportunity to come back through your children. So you think you're having new birth, you're having children, but those are actually ancestors that have been here before, coming back. So they want those opportunities to come back and experience things. And so whether you're in a same culture or ethnicity relationship or in a mixed relationship, as long as you remember your ancestors and the place that they hold in your life, then there's no problem with it. It's when people ignore it that it becomes a problem.
yeah.
The other thing is, once someone is already married, then they have to negotiate. It's like, okay, I practice this and I'd like you to practice this with me. It's very difficult to live in a household, have spiritual icons, and live a spiritual philosophy, and your partner not live that same philosophy.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at what is the what they call the cradle of civilization, or no, the birth of civilization, and you go back to Eve, um, in the Olduvai Gorge in Africa, where they found the oldest bones of a female, and that is the female that is the progenitor for all females on Earth. So at some point, we were all African. You might right now might have blonde hair and blue eyes, but at some point you were African. And so you have to make the distinction, and people have to come to accept, yeah, my late ancestors might be from Sweden. That's where I get blue eyes and blonde hair and pale skin. But my primordial ancestors are from Africa.
Yeah. Wow. This is really powerful what you're talking about, because as as our culture continues to change, these are the conversations that I would imagine people are going to need to have, and they are going to reach out. They're going to question, and they're going to have these kinds of concerns, and that's going to impact the decisions that they make going forward.
That's where progress comes from.
Yeah.
Having the discussion, wrestling with, I never thought of that before, or I thought about that, but I never really gave it a lot of attention. Now you got to give it a lot of attention, you know. I would say to those that are already in, um, I hate the term biracial, but mixed race or mixed ethnicity relationships, have those conversations. It'll make you better equipped to deal with your children when they come out and they have conversations. So
Yeah.
mommy is saying the same thing daddy is saying, and daddy is saying the same thing mommy is saying, and y'all had that conversation before the child was even born.
Yeah. I can tell you, with the statistics and the data being what it is, there are going to be a lot of families with these conversations going forward.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. But see, here's the other piece that a lot of people don't take into account. Even within the African American community, you could almost say, unless you grew up in the same town um, your whole life, that you're biracial. Because if I come from Seattle, you're from Virginia, I'm used to viewing life and the world in a totally different way than you are in Virginia. Or if you're in Seattle, or if I'm in Seattle and you're in Phoenix, I'm used to viewing life completely different. I have a whole different set of values. I have a whole different set of core beliefs. I have a whole different mindset when it comes to my people. Um, and that's based on culture.
Yeah. So you're talking about diversity within the culture and how we navigate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to begin to accept the fact that as much as we're the same, we're different because of how we've been socialized.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. And that's why we have so much discord, and that's not even taking into account the male and female dynamics, where oftentimes mothers, you know, they baby their sons, spoil their sons, but they treat their daughters and teach them how to be leaders.
Hmm.
Because in their mind, if you're going to be a black woman in this society, you need to know how to work hard. But
Yeah.
they don't do the same thing for the black males.
Yeah. You're touching on something very very hot right there. You're really touching on something hot right there. And I have really really enjoyed this conversation. And in fact, at some point I'd like to continue it, and maybe there's a series or something here. But
Yeah, because I feel like I haven't really addressed a lot of the spirituality aspects
yeah,
that people, are going to be have to take into account. We're I didn't talk about the environment and how, our role as stewards needs to we need to push ourselves forward in that,
mm,
because the people who are the stewards now and have been in the past have done a poor job of preserving our water, preserving our earth, making sure that we don't take too much out, at one time, not putting anything back in. This whole thing with Monsanto and them growing foods, and then the earth being worthless after that. You can't grow anything in it.
wow.
What happens if we start to do that in mass just because? Nobody needs all that food. Half the time the food goes to waste.
What you bring up a good point about protecting and caring for the earth. I know a lot of people there are a lot of people around the world having this conversation. And here in the U.S., it's typically a Native American conversation, or an indigenous kind of conversation. But what you're bringing to the forefront, and especially as we begin to, the research talks about climate change and the temperature here in Arizona increasing. I know that you're in
Hmm.
Phoenix, so I mean, I don't know how much more increases y'all can take up there.
Man, last summer was something else, and it was my first summer, so I didn't know what I was getting into.
Yeah,
They
and
said
so
137 degrees. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah. Right. And so Tucson is right behind you guys. We're a few degrees cooler, but this temperature is expected to increase. And everything that I've read and researched and so forth, talks about the coming water wars and these types of things. And so
Hmm.
this intention around caring for the earth and taking leadership in that, which is something that um, I honestly in our community I don't necessarily see a whole lot of. It's kind of pushed off because you could probably pick a number of reasons why. Um,
Well, I think the number one reason why is we have so many other survival issues that we have to deal with, like housing and work, employment, and other things that environmentalism kind of takes a back seat. But the more you grow spiritually, the more you realize you're part of an ecosystem, and you have to do your part to maintain that ecosystem. Um, and we're behind the curve because of where we are and how we live. You know,
wow.
most of us live in an urban, concrete setting. We've never some folks have never walked in dirt with their shoes off before.
Yeah. So this
Never. If you ask somebody, well, um, where the chickens come from? The grocery store. They ain't never been to a farm to see a chicken. You know, if they didn't see the Purdue commercials, they wouldn't know what a chicken looked like if it wasn't, cut up in legs, breasts, thighs, and you know. So we have to become better stewards for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Because here's the thing: there could come a time where all we have to rely on is each other. The earth and my mother-in-law was a mystic. She's written several books, but I used to sit and listen to her talk, and she talks about every so often the earth purges itself because people don't get it right. They haven't gotten it right for quite some time. So we have earthquakes, we have floods, we have hurricanes, we have all these natural disasters that help purge and hopefully teach some people a lesson. But we're not getting it. We just go by insurance.
mm,
You live on a floodplain. If you stay in that floodplain, every year your house is, or every 2 or 3 years, your house is going to flood. Well, I'll just buy insurance. I'll just lift up my house and the water can run underneath. So what happens to the ground underneath?
mm.
What happens when, you have elders in the house and it's flooded? If you just move the house, you don't have that problem.
Yeah, it's what you're talking about really strikes at the heart of a Western ideology around materialism and money, as opposed to addressing issues um, at their core natural state. And this is something that I see like more and more people moving back to, and
Yeah.
which ties it in, of course, with these ancient spiritual systems.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at it like the African and most indigenous cultures. Their philosophy is live in kind with the land. Many European cultures, their philosophy is let's control the land.
Mm,
So if we want to prevent flooding, and here's the thing, the reason the land that you're damming up is so rich in soil is because the water we used to bring in minerals and everything. So now you're making that, um, you're putting houses on it. You put a dam up so it doesn't flood from the natural rivers. You put a dam up, and now you're putting houses down on a low plane. Like if it doesn't rain enough and overflow the dam, it's gonna flood. Like that's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
know,
and that's that whole concept of control versus living in kind. If I'm living in kind, I'm getting out the way.
yeah, these principles are going to be increasingly important, especially as uh, there's this move to be an interplanetary species. Um, these kinds of principles will be very important, and I can only imagine. Um, I can only imagine what's possible if these kinds of principles aren't adhered to. I mean, but that's a bigger conversation. Um, I'm going to stop us right now because I could keep going
Okay.
with this conversation because it is so rich and so good, and we could
And
touch
there's
on
so
so
much
many
we haven't touched on.
and so many things we haven't touched on. So let's do this. Let's block off maybe another 30 minutes or so. I'm going to actually
Okay.
stop the camera here.